Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I am super excited to have in studio with me Kathleen Sgamma. She is the president of Western Energy Alliance, and we are very excited to partner with Western Energy Alliance on August 22nd for our public lands event. We are also partnering with OEDIT, that is the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, as well as the Outdoor Industry Association, the Colorado Recreation Office, and we're going to hear a few thoughts from Jim Augsbury of the Western Governors Association. So welcome, Kathleen. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, and I'm really looking forward to the event as well.
Yeah, glad to hear it. It's going to be one exciting event, one that I think a lot of Coloradans are interested to have a discussion about, right? We see lots of, I want to say contention between the oil and gas industry and people that are in the recreation industry. So we see a lot of back and forth between that. But there's more land to go around than we think about.
Well, I don't really see that there's a lot of contention.
Okay.
Like you said, there is a lot of land to go around. There are about 700 million acres of federal lands.
Yeah.
And hundreds of millions of acres of those are already set aside in national parks, wilderness areas, roadless areas. So there are already areas that we absolutely don't operate in at all.
Right.
And then there are also hundreds of millions of acres of working landscapes, lands that are appropriate for ranching and mining and energy development. And those are, after a public land use planning process, certain areas are designated as appropriate for oil and natural gas leasing. So those areas are not parks, they're not wilderness areas, and they sustain communities across the West. So we really don't see a contention. We think all jobs are valuable. All economic impact is valuable. And so, but when we noticed that the Outdoor Industry Association was kind of actively politically against oil and natural gas, we tried to reach out to them and say, hey, we enable your products. You can't develop fleece and nylon and ropes for climbing and just about anything that you're making. You need oil and natural gas development. You need oil and natural gas. But if people don't have their cars, they can't get out into the great outdoors anyway. So we don't really see contention. And there are already lands that are locked away from oil and natural gas. And then there are lands that are what's called multiple use. And they're a mix of uses. They can be used for recreation and energy development. So, we just really don't see that there should be contention. So we reached out to the Outdoor Industry Association.
Yeah.
And they ignored us. And so we, whatever, they just were not interested in engaging.
Yeah.
So we worked with Colorado Business Roundtable, and after many months, they agreed to come to the table. So we're excited that they're coming to the table.
Yeah.
But we see there's a symbiotic relationship there, and we don't think that our industry should be in contention.
I actually would agree with you. I was one of those people, I believe that before I started this job, I thought there was no place for oil and gas. How dare you, disrupt my lands and my environment. However, you are right. You bring up some wonderful points. Economic development, right? Not only do jobs contribute, or not only do you contribute to jobs being had in Colorado, you also contribute to giving back in an economic sense to Coloradans. You also made a great point of without oil and natural gas production, we can't have phones. We can't get to the great outdoors. We can't enjoy those outdoors in our tents and our backpacks and things without oil and gas production. So I think those are wonderful points. And I'm surprised that OIA didn't want to come to the table with you at first. But I am excited to see that they are coming to the table August 22nd.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think they'll find that we have more in common than we have disagreement over. Members of the oil and natural gas community, well, first of all, we support 10.3 million jobs across the country.
Yes.
And here in Colorado, we support 110 100,000 jobs or more. It depends on which economic analysis you're looking at. But certainly we employ, over 100,000 people in Colorado, and many more indirectly. But we live here, so we're out recreating just like everybody else. We hunt and fish and backpack and hike and climb, and we do all those things that everybody else does.
Yeah, absolutely. You too are enjoying it. You're not just evil beings that live in one home. But I also want to ask here. So, as you know, we elected a new governor. It's been it'll be almost 2 years that he's been up at Polis, and he created some new legislation around oil and gas production, and that one of those being that we are giving the local governments more say-so in whether or not oil and gas can be drilled. How has that impacted your industry thus far, or is it even?
Well, Western Energy Alliance focuses more on federal issues. So groups like COGA and CPC, the Colorado Petroleum Council, could weigh in more on the Colorado rules specifically. However, we saw a balance under Governors Ritter and Hickenlooper. And part of that balance is that the state really has the expertise in regulating oil and natural gas. It's a technical, complicated field. Governor Hickenlooper came up with a compromise to where communities certainly had a say in where that development occurred. But really, Governor Polis and the legislature has upended that balance. And so right now we're going through multiple rounds of rulemaking that is severely hampering oil and natural gas development in the state of Colorado, and has frankly killed billions of dollars of capital investment in the state. So I think we'll see the fallout from that over time, especially as these rules drag on and on and on. But Western Energy Alliance focuses on public lands issues, and the rules regarding local control don't really have much say on federal lands, right? Because the federal government has that decision-making power. Of course, they do that in conjunction with the governor and the local communities, but local communities can't come in and put on rules that apply on federal lands. There may be some contentions around that as various counties look at their own rules, but that kind of remains to be seen, and it's hard to say at this point yet.
Yes, but I agree with you. I think the longer that this remains an issue and the more and more we keep hemming and hawing over those legislation rules, we'll see a lot more fallout in a bit of time. So Kathleen, wonderful public lands event. Again, that's August 22nd. Very excited for that. But in the meantime, what else does Western Energy Alliance have going on? What are you guys currently working on right now?
Well, Western Energy Alliance focuses on federal issues that affect all Western producing states. So we don't focus just on Colorado. We've got a lot of production in New Mexico, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, Montana, North Dakota. So we cover those issues that impact the region. So air issues that cross boundaries, Endangered Species Act issues, tribal lands issues, public lands. We're kind of the tip of the spear in Washington, D.C. on the public lands issues.
Wonderful. That is interesting to hear. I love knowing that you guys are in that conversation. As we know, oil and gas and energy in and of itself kind of has a bad guy reputation at the moment. Not energy so much as renewables are really, they have a nice light shining on them right now. So how is that working out for you? Because when you say Western Energy Alliance, you guys don't just participate in oil and gas endeavors.
Yes, we do. Absolutely. Yes. We're just an oil and natural gas group. So our name is a little too broad, perhaps. However, we focus just on oil and natural gas issues. Yes, it is unfortunate that certain politicians, pretty much every Democratic candidate for president, has decided that we're a good whipping boy. So it's unfortunate because, yes, the burning of oil, natural gas, coal creates greenhouse gas emissions, and those contribute however much to climate change. But the alternative is so much worse. If we stopped using oil, natural gas, and coal tomorrow, as Secretary of State Kerry pointed out, we could go to zero tomorrow and it still would have no impact on the climate because the rest of the world's emissions are increasing, and we would be so much poorer. Actually, our life would cease to exist here. Besides the obvious things like fueling your car, we heat your home, we cool it during the summer, we are the feedstock for fertilizer, medicines, plastics, electronics. All of these things are made with oil and natural gas as a component. So our information technology structure would go away without us. We generate a huge portion of electricity. So, renewables everybody loves, but they're not 24/7, and they only provide a fraction of total U.S. energy consumption. They're just not reliable. They're not a solution that does everything that oil and natural gas does. So, on balance, if you look at the impact from climate change versus the benefits we provide, the reason people continue to use oil and natural gas is because the benefits far outweigh those costs. And those costs we bear in terms of regulation. We work to reduce emissions, land use, water use. We're constantly improving how we operate so that we continue to minimize our environmental impact. And in fact, the increased use of natural gas in the electricity sector is the number one reason the United States has reduced greenhouse gas emissions more than any other country. Now, I know there are politicians who don't want to look at that and give us credit for that because it's not politically expedient for them. But we didn't participate in Kyoto. We pulled out of Paris. But still, we are reducing our emissions faster than Europe. And meanwhile, India, China, their emissions are going through the roof. So we are a leader in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and we're proud of that record.
As you should be. That is fascinating, and I believe that's honestly the first time I've heard that, which is sad, really, in the grand scheme of things. That should be more public knowledge. That being said, coming to the table, so you do only work with oil and gas, natural gas entities, but that doesn't mean that you're anti-partnerships with renewables, correct?
Well, wind and solar can't operate without backup electricity generation, and the best way to provide that is with natural gas. Our combined cycle turbines are very efficient. They can be spun up quickly so that when the wind stops blowing or, at night when the sun goes down, our natural gas electricity generation can be used to fill in those gaps when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. So natural gas is a natural partner with wind and wind and solar energy. They don't like to admit it, though. They would like to, put forth to the public that they can do everything. But the reality is we don't have an alternative that is 24/7 that does everything that oil and natural gas do. You've got hydro, which is certainly 24/7, but nobody likes to admit that that's a renewable energy, and that doesn't even get credit when, Jared Polis and others talk about going 100% renewables, which is absurd, right?
Yes.
Because running water certainly is renewable.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely is. You bring up some wonderful points. So, Kathleen, I have to ask you, just as a woman, one of the things that I am seeing more and more of in the energy world, more and more women leadership, which is fascinating. So I like that you, first of all, are president of a company, but also in the energy sector. I'm sure you get asked this all the time, but I have to ask, are you seeing more and more women coming up? Is the world of energy balancing out a little bit?
Well, it is exciting to see so many young engineers and geologists coming up through the ranks.
Yeah. Fantastic. Awesome.
And so those two professions particularly form the basis of the oil and natural gas industry.
Yes.
Obviously there are financial people and lots of other people, legal people, political people like myself. But it's the engineers and the geologists who make things happen. They find the next find. They figure out how to get that oil and natural gas out of that new formation, out of this particular area. So those engineers and geologists are the leaders of companies eventually. And so we'll see more and more women rise to the top. But we have CEOs. Occidental Petroleum, for example, which just bought Anadarko's assets in Colorado and elsewhere. Their CEO is a woman.
Yeah. Like I said, I've seen more and more. It's just been an exciting time, I think, for women leadership all around in every industry, but particularly in the energy industry. And as you're saying, tech too, and, engineering, which is an exciting time. What are you most looking forward to at this public lands event? As you mentioned, OIA kind of cold shouldered you, so this is a great way to have a conversation with them. But is there anything in particular that you're hoping to get out of this event?
I think just a public conversation. It's very easy to demagogue oil and natural gas and just say it shouldn't happen anywhere. Well, the reality is over 80% of our energy is from fossil fuels. We're not going away anytime soon because, hey, somebody might discover through basic R&D something that does everything the oil and gas does. But until such time, we are providing a product that people use to enrich their lives, to make it safe. I mean, where would we be without modern medicine? Medical devices, all enabled by oil and natural gas. Your water infrastructure isn't possible. You get clean water because of the infrastructure powered by oil and natural gas and coal. So, on balance, not on balance, extremely on balance, we're providing a product that people use. And, so we're just, I just enjoy that conversation. Some people are just far over on one side, and no matter what you say, oil and gas should go away. But, if you have an intelligent conversation with reasonable people, we are bettering people's lives, and we are working constantly to reduce our environmental impact. Every energy source has impact. You can't have renewable energy without a lot of mining. You can't have EVs with electric vehicles without a huge amount of mining. So there's impact there. There's also impact to wildlife. And, every energy source has an impact. We all work, wind, solar, oil, natural gas, coal. We all work to reduce that impact. But there's no source of energy out there that is just, free of everything. So we need to look at that balance. We need to look at the trade-offs. And I just enjoy the conversation. And then when it comes to public lands, you mentioned it very early on in our conversation today. All Americans own our public lands. Well, all Americans also own the energy beneath those public lands. So we are producing that energy for their benefit. We are paying them a royalty back to the federal government. We also fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So we fund conservation and voluntary efforts as well. So it's just a good conversation to have to make people aware of the balance and the trade-offs. And, it also just sometimes helps to remind people that we're not operating in national parks.
Yes, absolutely, which is something that you would think would be commonplace, but always a good reminder.
Well, people just think of public lands as where they recreate.
Yes.
They just do. Yosemite and Yellowstone come to mind. But what they forget is that there are, hundreds of thousands of acres of just lands across the West that are still administered by the federal government, but used by productive users like ranchers and miners and oil and natural gas, done under strict environmental controls for the benefit of the American people. But communities across the West depend on recreation, and they depend on oil and natural gas, and we can do both.
Absolutely. Very well said. I appreciate that. And the next few minutes here, I just want to talk a little bit about perhaps what Western Energy Alliance is planning in the future. We have a 2020 election coming up. There's a strong possibility that we will get different leadership that is, again, more of that pro 100% renewables streak. Any thoughts or any plans in the works to maybe see where that conversation can go?
Well, is quite a bit of very extreme rhetoric coming out of the presidential candidates. We would hope that once the primary is done and once the election is over, whoever wins, will be reasonable, and we can work with them. Because, when you present the choices, oh, you really want to take, if we don't produce it here in the United States, are we going to do without our cars and our electricity and our mobile devices? No, we would have to import that energy from overseas. So the United States became the #1 oil and natural gas producer in the world a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be better to produce it here under strict environmental regulations than importing it from Russia and Saudi Arabia? We're keeping $350 billion from going overseas. So that means jobs here at home. We're keeping electricity prices and gasoline prices low for consumers here. And so do we really want to send that benefit overseas? I mean, the choice is pretty obvious when you look at the other, when you look at the choices.
At the alternative, yes. That is one thing that I think a lot of us forget too, is that security purpose, right? We are drilling here at home. We have these resources here at home. And the reason for keeping them here, as you said, economic benefits. We already know that when we are going to drill in our own, they're under strict regulations. And we are doing the best that we can. And again, watching our carbon footprint and all of these things. If we ship it off, who knows what we're getting in return?
Right. Aside from, say, Canada, Norway, the rest of the world just doesn't operate the way we do here in the United States. We have strict environmental controls, and we have companies motivated to go even beyond what those controls are. And we have states like Colorado that keep pushing the envelope. So, whereas we know Russia is an environmental disaster.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to ask you here in these last few minutes, somebody is interested in getting a job in the energy industry, particularly in oil and gas. There's plenty of jobs to go around, so there's no threat to the industry being shut down, correct?
Well, we have been a growing industry. We go through cycles where we expand and then we tighten our belts. Right now, we're kind of in a belt tightening mode. Costs of production kind of crept up as the price crept up, and so there has been a bit of a contraction. But that's not to say that there's not a good future in the industry. We employ about we support 10.3 million jobs across the country. And so, some of those are directly in the oil and natural gas industry. And we see, we're excited to see lots of young people coming up as petroleum engineers and geologists. But, like any industry, there are accountants and economists and lawyers, and then the indirect economic impact from the recreation industry through, various service companies and suppliers of goods and services. So the future looks bright. We continue to be the #1 oil and natural gas producer in the world. We overturned a law in 2015 that prevented us from exporting crude oil. And since that time, we've been able to export our oil, and that has led to lower global prices, which has meant the consumer here at home enjoys lower gasoline prices than they would otherwise. So we continue to be the #1 supplier, and that's just good for the economy here in the United States.
100%. Well, thank you very much, Kathleen. It has been a pleasure having you on. You are welcome back anytime, but as I said, I'm looking forward to this event on August 22nd. That is going to be, again, with the Western Energy Alliance. We're going to hear a few words from Jim Augsbury of Western Governors Association. Outdoor Industry Association will be there, the Colorado Recreation Office, as well as the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. That is going to be a fantastic event. Unfortunately, it is already sold out, so we cannot get you there, but if you've already got tickets, we're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much, Kathleen.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.